Here we go, the first video game movie ever made. But should it have been? And is it really as bad as everybody says? Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers is the 1993 adaptation of the extremely popular Nintendo game from the late 80s. It's actually not an adaptation though. In reading up on it online, you find that it's actually a prequel to the game, and the game itself is supposed to be an adaptation of the events that take place in the movie. I don't know. I don't make this stuff up. The story follows Mario and Luigi, two plumber brothers that live in New York City, that meet a pretty girl named Daisy, who subsequently gets kidnapped and taken to an alternate dimension, where they follow to try and rescue her. We find out that this alternate dimension came about because 65 million years ago, when the meteor struck and wiped out the dinosaurs, it actually split our dimension, splintering off a new dimension where the dinosaurs live, and have evolved since then. Upon arriving in this dimension, the Mario brothers find an alternate cyber/steampunk New York City, full of dinosaurs, human-like creatures, dinosaur-human creatures, and Dennis Hopper. The city is covered by a fungus that we find used to be the king before he was de-evolved by the new king, Koopa, played by Dennis Hopper, which is who had Daisy and a slew of other girls from our New York City kidnapped in hopes of finding the princess who was abandoned in our New York City 20 some odd years ago. Because along with being abandoned in our dimension, the princess was also left with the missing shard to the meteor that split our dimensions in half. If he finds this shard and puts it back together with the original meteor, for whatever reason, the dimensions will come back together. And that's what Koopa wants, because his dimension is pretty much overall shitty. So from here we follow the brothers through this Dinotopia as they go on miscellaneous adventures to try and save Daisy and acquire the rock before Koopa, culminating in an epic ending that takes place across both dimensions. As stated before, this movie came out in 1993, and yes, it was the first video game movie ever made. It was absolutely slaughtered by critics when it came out, and audiences didn't care for it too much either. The movie was the epitome of a bomb, or in this case, a ba-bomb. In subsequent years, the movie has shown up on many a top 10 worst video game movies ever made, and furthermore, many worst movies ever made. So here it is 25 years later. Is the movie really that bad? No, it's not. Now, I'm not saying it's a masterpiece, but it's nowhere near as bad as everybody's made it out to be. In all reality, the movie has a lot more positives going for it than it does negatives. From a technical standpoint, the movie's great. It's well shot. The special effects are actually really good, especially the animatronics. While it doesn't compare to nowadays, of course, I mean, it was 25 years ago and at the beginning of CGI, but taking that into consideration, it's actually pretty good. Sure, there's parts where you can tell that was a blue screen, but there's actually a lot of practical work done here, and it looks pretty damn good. There was in fact a ton of money dumped into this movie, and as far as what shows up on screen, you can tell the production of this film is fantastic. The practical world that they built for this movie is pretty damn cool, and it's pretty awe-inspiring when you see it to think that they actually built all these things. And it's not just the production design and all the technical aspects of the movie that are good. The actors' performances are pretty good too. Nobody's terrible. There's a few goofy characters here and there, but they're supposed to be that way. Mainly Iggy and Spike,
Koopa Koopa cousins,
come off the most goofy, but that's kind of how they're supposed to be. They're the comic relief. Now, I'm not saying there's any Oscar-worthy performances here, but there's not bad performances either. They're actually pretty good, especially considering the material. But then there's the story, and that is where there are some missteps. It's not awful, I'll say that, but it's not great either. It's just kind of inconsistent and all over the place. It's easy to see how there are a lot of script and story changes midway through production, as well as multiple reshoots to change things. The production woes that this movie had are epic. If you ever want an entertaining good read, look it up. The directors in the studio had some epic battles during this shoot, and I'm assuming that's probably a big factor in why the story is so erratic and all over the place, and is also one of the big reasons that the tone is extremely uneven. The movie has a hard time making up its mind whether it wants to be dark and gritty or goofy and slapstick. Furthermore, character motivations and alliances just suddenly change throughout the movie for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So at times it's kind of hard to keep straight who's on whose side. These and other erratic changes in tone throughout the movie are what make it a little bit difficult to watch at times. They don't make the movie awful like a lot of people would lead you to believe, but they do definitely make you wonder what the hell's going on sometimes. The movie has tons of interesting and entertaining ideas, themes, and moments that run throughout the whole movie, but it tends to trip over itself on the story in parts. However, even with all these conflicting parts, the movie still has an undeniable charm and is definitely fun if you take it for what it is. An ambitious adaptation of a video game from the late 80s that's trying to have a good time. People give this movie a lot of flack for its story and themes and just really all around, saying it's not faithful to the Super Mario Brothers. But let's harken back to 1992 for a moment and look at what the story for Super Mario Brothers up to that point really was. Think about it. What was it? Random plumber shows up in weird Mushroom Kingdom world to save a princess he's never met from a giant spiked-back turtle monster named Koopa? They didn't really have a lot to go on there. So yeah, they had to fill in a lot of blanks to make an hour-and-a-half long movie. And honestly, while it doesn't all hit, it is all creative and interesting to watch. I honestly think that if this movie wasn't branded a Super Mario Bros. Movie, it probably wouldn't have received half the flack that it got. And it probably would have done better at the box office. I don't necessarily think it would have been the summer blockbuster of 1993. That honor goes to another dinosaur movie. But I do think the movie probably would have fared a little bit better and not received all the hate that it did, and still does. Even though the movie has garnered quite a cult following in the past 25 years, we're probably never going to receive the sequel that the movie sets up in the end. And that's kind of a shame, because I had a really good time with this movie. I'm big enough to admit it. When I went and saw this movie in movie theaters when it first came out, I absolutely loved it. Going back to it 25 years later, now as an adult, I was kind of afraid I wasn't going to enjoy it as much this time around. But I did. It was a really good time. I'm not expecting Shakespeare here, and the movie definitely has its shortcomings, but every movie does, and I don't think the movie deserves the flack that it gets, especially not one of the worst movies ever made, and not even one of the worst video game movies ever made. As I continue on this journey to review all the video game movies ever made, believe me, I've seen some of them. There are a lot worse out there. A lot worse. So what do I think? Honestly, for most people, I would say that Super Mario Bros. The movie is worth a rent. It's not a bad movie, and I think you'll enjoy your time with it. For fans, and even fans of video games, and also for people that just aren't too uptight, I'd say it's worth a buy. If nothing else, it's a piece of video game history. And it's not a bad movie. So there it is, guys, my review of the Super Mario Bros. Movie. A flawed movie for sure, but still a really fun movie. If you enjoyed this and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button. It helps my little channel out more than you know. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, I'll see you guys next time. There are some truly weird fucking moments in this movie, though.
King Koopa here.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'd like the Koopa special.
Pterodactyl tail on that?
Yes. Dino, lizard, hold the mammal, no worms, and spicy.
All right, one down. Who's next in my list of video game movies? Double Dragon? Trust the fungus.
Was she corpulent? Very corpulent?
No, she's just really round.